Today we will be talking about tiling and what it is. Our chapter focuses heavily on the concept of tiling and how we use it more frequently than we think. As a matter of fact, we have been using tiling even in ancient times. First, let us take a look at some previous productions of tiling from the ancient past. Our ancestors had an artistic practice of covering their floors and walls with patterns and mosaics through the process of tiling. Such artwork is seen in places like in ancient Roman dwellings and Muslim mosques. Here we have a section of the mosaic within the Afghanistan Blue Mosque where you can see patterns of geometric figures being repeated throughout. Similarly to the following image of the ancient site of Aphrodisias mosaic in ancient Rome. Ancient Roman tiling mosaics were commonly placed at the living space within Roman dwellings. These were meant to showcase the luxury wealthy Romans had, and were often used for aesthetic pleasures as well. Basically, these mosaics created by tiling were typically placed on a special section of the ancient Roman home. They were meant to be viewed as Romans would walk by around it, and the more complex and vivid they were, then the more wealthier the owner of the house was known as. As you can see, tiling has played a role in the aspects of the ancient Roman social and political life. Now this is an example of a mosque tiling. Islamic religion does not permit the worship of iconography. An example would be an image of God. Their iconicism led to Islamic art being dominated by geometric patterns, which is represented in their tilings found within their houses of worship. The contemplation of these produced geometric patterns are also practiced as a form of worship. Let's go briefly over the definition of tilings before we get more in depth. Tiles are essentially repeated shapes that cover a flat surface without gaps or overlaps. You can use a variety of shapes to produce these tilings, such as rectangles and triangles as shown on the screen. Other examples of tilings include triangles, squares, and even hexagons. As a matter of fact, there are even more kinds of shapes that can be used for tiling, as you will see soon enough. By now, you're probably thinking, why should I care? Or, how does this affect my life? Well, as a matter of fact, tilings can be found in many aspects of our lives. For example, remodeling. Chances are you have probably walked on tiling pretty recently. Knowing how tiling works and what it is can be beneficial whenever you decide to remodel your home. It helps you understand how patterns can come together with tiling to create the floor you want. You can't just put these tiles anywhere you like. The pattern must be followed so it stays consistent. For example, here are some floor tilings that you could probably use in the future. Don't forget walls. Tilings can also be put on walls for an aesthetic design. I mean, who wouldn't want to have their bathroom look like any of these three, honestly? Tiling can also be found in fashion. Although much more intricate and dimensional, the same essential concept is used. Repeated shapes to cover a surface without gaps or overlaps are employed on the design dresses. Oftentimes, they are much more complex, resulting like the one on the runway, which I think is pretty neat. Tiling also has heavy ties to art. Art influenced by tiling has been created throughout time. Whether it be a reproduction or interpretation, art certainly has been influenced by tiling. In fact, art can be created by using tiling, such as these examples. Here we have cats, fishes, ducks, and geese throughout. Notice how there is no space or overlapping within these images, characteristics of what makes tiling amazing. Here we have more complex examples of tiling found within mosques and ancient Roman houses. As you can see, there is also no space or overlapping within these images. The repetition of these figures truly captivate the eyes of the individual and draws attention to itself. As a quick recap, hopefully now you see how tiling does in fact truly come into play within our daily lives. If you ever remodel your home, or buy a dress or shirt characterized by a tile pattern, or even visit a mosque or an ancient Roman site, you will now certainly know how these products came into creation, and hopefully now you will admire these with even more amazement.
Is tiling. Tiling is a covering of the entire infinite plane by non-overlapping regions called tiles. Tiles come in many different shapes. We use repeated shapes to cover flat surfaces without gaps or overlaps. In manufacturing, stamping components from a sheet of metal is most economical if the shapes of the components fits together without the gaps, thus making the shapes form a tiling. Throughout history, our ancestors have had an artistic impulse to cover floors and walls with patterns of tiling. Through the Roman dwellings to the Muslim mosaics, humans have expressed their usage for patterns in other decorative arts as well, such as carpets, fabrics, and baskets. Tiling is also used in mathematics. We start with one or more types of tiles and ask if they can fit in a pattern, and if so, how. Unfortunately, there is no way to decide this question in all cases. Some sets of tile we can exhibit tiling. For others, we can prove that there can't be any tiling. Mathematicians have proved that there is no algorithm that can tell for every conceivable set of tile shapes which of the two solutions hold. The simplest types of tiling are monohedral tiling. Monohedral tiling is a tiling that only uses one size and the shape of tile. The simplest tiles are regular polygons, which have all sides the same length and all angles equal. A square is a regular polygon with 4 equal sides and 4 equal interior angles. A triangle with all sides, being an equilateral triangle, is a regular polygon. A polygon with 6 sides is a hexagon. Regular polygons have a high degree of symmetry. A regular tiling is an edge-to-edge tiling that uses only one kind of regular polygon. A tiling is edge-to-edge if all the tiles are polygons, and for every tile, each edge coincides with the entire edge of a bordering tile. There are only 3 types of regular tiling: squares, equilateral triangles, and regular hexagons.
Now that we know what tiling is, as well as some basic types of tiling, let's take a deeper look at some of the math that makes tiling work. First, how can you tell if certain shapes will be able to fit together and make a proper tiling? A tiling, as stated earlier, is made up of shapes that cover a plane without spaces in between them or overlap. So how can you tell if certain shapes will fit together? You could always use trial and error, but that would be quite time-consuming. Instead, all you have to do is check and see if all of the angles at one vertex have a sum of 360 degrees. If they have more or less than that exact number, then those shapes cannot tile a plane. This rule is the reason for why there are only 3 types of regular tilings. Only equilateral triangles, squares, and regular hexagons can meet this requirement. For example, look at these triangles. There are 6 angles at the vertex in the middle. Each has an angle measurement of 60 degrees. The sum of the 6 angles is 360 degrees, meaning that it can tile a plane. However, a regular pentagon cannot tile a plane. With 3 pentagons, the sum of the angles falls short of 360 degrees. And when you add a 4th one, the sum goes well past that. With this knowledge under our belt, we can now learn about irregular tilings. What is the difference between regular tilings and irregular tilings? It's quite self-explanatory. Where regular tilings are tilings made up of regular polygons, an irregular tiling is made up of irregular polygons, or polygons with some sides that may be longer than the others, or interior angles that are larger or smaller than the others. With irregular tilings, any kind of triangle or quadrilateral can tile a plane. For reference, a quadrilateral is any 4-sided shape. This can be seen by the following examples. These scalene triangles, or triangles with 3 sides of different lengths, can still tile a plane, just like an equilateral triangle can. And here we can see that an irregular quadrilateral is just as capable of tiling as a square is. One term which we have not yet discussed is what makes a shape convex. According to our textbook, a shape is convex if any 2 points on the shape, including points on the shape's boundary, can be connected by a line segment without the line segment ever leaving the boundary of the shape. For example, this quadrilateral here would be considered convex because there are no 2 points that cannot be connected without leaving the boundaries of the shape. How does this connect to tiling? Simply put, any convex polygon with 6 or less sides is able to tile a plane. As far as mathematicians are currently aware, if a convex polygon has 7 or more sides, then it cannot tile a plane. What about this quadrilateral? It does not quite fit the requirements to be considered a convex shape. This means that this shape is considered a non-convex polygon. Can a non-convex polygon still tile a plane? For the sake of this video, we'll keep things simple. Any quadrilateral, no matter if it is convex or non-convex, can tile a plane. This can be seen when we try and tile this similar quadrilateral.
The Dutch artist M.C. Escher was inspired by the great variety of decoration and tilings in the Alhambra, a 14th century palace built during the last years of Islamic dominance in Spain. He devoted much of his career of making prints to creating tilings with tiles in the shapes of living beings, a practice forbidden to Muslims. Those prints of interlocking animals and people have inspired awe and wonder among people all over the world. Following Escher's artistic genius, we investigate monohedral tilings in which the tile used may be convex and have boundary any curve whatever, rather than one consisting of only straight edges. You may wonder just how much liberty can be taken in shaping a tile and how you can design an Escher-like tiling yourself. The simplest case is when the tile is just translated in 2 directions. That is, when copies are laid edge to edge in rows. Each tile must fit exactly into the ones next to it, including its neighbors above and below. We say that each tile is a translation of each other, one because we can move one to coincide with another, without doing any rotation or reflection. When it is possible for a tile to cover the plane in this, a tile can tile the plane by translation alone if either there are 4 consecutive points A, B, C, and D on the boundary such that the boundary part from A to B is congruent by translation to the boundary part from D to C, and the boundary part from B to C is congruent by translation to the boundary part from A to D. There are 6 consecutive points A, B, C, D, E, and F on the boundary such that the boundary parts AB, BC, and CD are congruent by translation, respectively, to the boundary parts ED, FE, and AF. Another way to look at translation is to look at this parhexagon as we modify and translate it, moving the same space from within the shape to create an actual figure of a horse head. By doing this, we make Escher-like tiling by translation from a parhexagon.